All right, homework 23, we are going to write the equation of the line given 2 points. Again, whenever we're going to write the equation of the line, we're going to put it in slope-intercept form, so y equals mx plus b. For the slope, you can either use the formula, or if you have the graph, you can just count it out. Sometimes they will give you the graph, and sometimes they'll just give you 2 points. If they just give you 2 points, you have to use the formula, but otherwise we can just count. The slope, again, is the rise over the run, so it's the change in the y direction, which is up or down, over the change in the x direction, which is your left, or most of the time the right, because I usually start on the left point and move to the right. So in this case, if I'm just going to count out my slope, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 up. So up 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the right. So over 5, and so m is going to equal 3/5. So I'm going to then use my slope and one of those 2 points in order to write the equation of the line. So it doesn't matter which one you use. I usually like to use the one in quadrant 1 since my numbers are both positive. If I have one in quadrant 1, but it really doesn't matter, I could use this other point too. I'm just going to use this one here at 1, 6. So it goes through the point 1, 6. Now these ones are like the ones we previously did. We know the slope and we know a point the equation goes through. We can find the y-intercept so we can write the equation of the line. So y is going to equal 3/5 x plus b. We are then going to use 1 for x and 6 for y. So 6 is going to equal 3/5 times 1 is still 3/5 plus b. So to solve that for b, I have to subtract my 3/5. 6 minus 3/5. Now what we're doing is we're finding our common denominator. Since this is over 1, the quick way to do that is just take the 5 times the 6. 5 times 6 is 30/5 then, right? 30/5 is the same thing as 6. Minus the 3/5 we already have is 27/5 for our b value. Well, if we think about 27/5 as a mixed number, 5 divides into 27 5 and 2/5 times. If I look here at my graph, where is my line touching my y-axis? Where is my y-intercept? Well, it's between the 5 and the 6, so 5 and 2/5 looks like it would make sense. I still need to write the answer. What is the equation of my line? Y equals, the slope was 3/5, so y equals 3/5 x. The y-intercept, positive 27/5. And that would be my equation of my line. So if you have the graph, you can just count out your slope, and then once you find your y-intercept, look on your graph, check to see, does it make sense for your problem? Number 2 then, they're going to give us one where we don't have the graph. If we don't have the graph, we have to find the slope using our formula for slope. So m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So the y value from point 2, which is negative 4, minus the y value from point 1, which is 1, gives me negative 5. The x value from point 2, which is 2, minus the x value from point 1, which is negative 4. When I subtract a negative, I end up adding, and so I get a slope of negative 5, 6. So y equals negative 5, 6, x plus some number b. Again, on my ordered pairs, when I substitute my point in, doesn't matter which one you use, either one will work. I'm just going to use the first one. So I'm going to put the negative 4 in for x and the 1 in for y. So 1 is going to equal, here I'm going to multiply. So negative 5 times negative 4 would be 20 over 6. If I have 20 over 6, it's going to reduce down to 10/3. Or we could have canceled. 2 goes into there 3 times and into there 2 times. So negative 5 times negative 2 is 10 over 3. If you're really bad with fractions, use your calculator. We have to solve this, so we have to subtract our 10/3. 1 minus 10/3. Again, I'm going to take the 3 times the 1, which makes that 3/3. 3/3 minus 10/3 would be negative 7/3 for our b value. So now that we know both the slope and the y-intercept, we can write the equation of our line. Y equals negative 5, 6x minus our 7/3. Number 3 then. Here again we're going to find the equation of our line. We want it in the form of y equals mx plus b. Here we just have the graph, so we could just go ahead and count our slope, unless you like to use the formula. But I'm going to start here. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 down. So that would be negative 4. And 1, 2, 3 to the right. So m is going to equal negative 4/3. I went 4 down and 3 to the right. So y equals negative 4/3 x plus some number b that I still have to find. Again, when I am plugging my numbers in, it doesn't matter which point you use. I'm just going to use this one, which is at 2, 6. So my ordered pair would be 2, 6. So 6 in for y, 2 in for x, so 6 equals, multiplying this out, I'm just going to get a negative 8/3. I can't simplify that, plus b. So solving this for b, I end up adding my 8/3. 6 plus 8/3. So again, 3 times 6 would give me 18/3, finding my common denominator, plus my 8/3 would give me 26/3. Again, when we have our y-intercept, which is our b value, we can always double check it if we have the graph. 3 divides into 26 8 times. 3 times 8 is 24, so I have 2 left over, so 8 2/3. So I look up here at my graph. Does that line cross at 8 2/3? Well, it's between the 8 and the 9, so yeah, 8 2/3 looks like it's a pretty good answer. My equation then. Y equals, my slope was negative 4/3, so negative 4/3 x. My y-intercept was a positive 26/3, so y equals negative 4/3 x plus 26/3. Four, 5, and 6, we're writing the equation of the vertical and horizontal lines through a given point. So they want you to remember those special cases where we have lines that go straight up and down or lines that go straight across. If that happens, to get the line that goes straight up and down, I have to have x equals a number. There's no y in my equation. It's just x equals like 3. Would go straight up and down at 3. Horizontal lines always start y equals, and I have my number. So it might be y equals 3, and it would go across the y-axis at 3. So when I want to write the equation of my horizontal and my vertical line, for my horizontal line, I know it always starts y equals. For my vertical line, I know it always starts x equals. Well, if I'm going to write the equation for a horizontal and a vertical line that has to touch this point, they want you to recognize that the negative 8 is the x value and 1 is the y value. So all I'm going to do to write my equation for my horizontal line, y equals 1, vertical line, x equals negative 8. So what would happen if I graphed both of those on the same coordinate plane is, if I graph the line y equals 1 at 1, on my y-axis, I would have that horizontal line. At negative 8, I'm going to say negative 8 is here. On my x-axis, I would have that vertical line. So the coordinates of the 2 points, or the coordinate of the point where those 2 lines intersect, would be at negative 8, positive 1. And that's what's going to happen there. So pretty easy to do. Most common mistake I see people make is they just put 1 and 8 in. They didn't write the equation of the line, nor did they tell us which way the line had to go. I need to have the y equals to have a horizontal line. I need to have the x equals to tell me it's a vertical line. So number 5, I'm going to write the equation for the horizontal and vertical lines that pass through the point -3, -1. So I know my horizontal line always starts y equals. I know my vertical line has to start x equals, and then I'm just going to look at my ordered pair. The y value of this point is -1. The x value of the point is -3. So my horizontal line would be y equals -1. My vertical line, x equals -3. If I drew those two lines, they'd intersect in that point. So number 6, the same kind of thing. Notice this time they ask for the vertical line and then the horizontal line. They're checking to see if you're reading and paying attention. My vertical line always starts x equals. My horizontal line always starts y equals. So I want the equation of the vertical and horizontal lines that go through this point. So x is going to equal -7. My y is going to equal the 3. Seven, 8, and 9, we are going to find the slopes of the lines that are parallel and perpendicular to a given line. First of all, we want to find the slope of the given line. If my equation is already solved for y, it's easy to do, but if it's not solved for y, I have to rearrange it. So we have to have the line in the form y equals mx plus b. If it's not, I'm going to do that first. So in this case, -2y is going to equal, moving my x to the other side, I'm going to have a -9x plus 2. I'm then going to divide by -2. So y equals a positive 9/2 x minus 1. Now, if I'm going to figure out what the slope of the line that is parallel and perpendicular to that line, first couple things I need to know. If my two lines are parallel, the slopes or the slant of the line should be the exact same thing. So, what would be the slope of the line that's parallel to this line? Well, it should have the exact same slope. So if the slope of this line is 9/2, then the slope of this line is going to be 9/2. It's going to be the same thing. What is the slope of the line that is perpendicular? Perpendicular means they're going to end up going like this. One's going up and down, one's going across. They might be turned, but they're going to be a right angle between those two things. It tells us on Alex that when you multiply the slope of the parallel and the perpendicular, you're always going to get -1. Well, what in the heck is that telling me? What I have to do to find the slope of the perpendicular is to do the opposite of the reciprocal. So if this is positive, the perpendicular one is going to be negative. Then I'm going to do the reciprocal of 9/2, which would make it 2/9. So on Alex, they're telling me if I take 9/2 times a -2/9, then I'm going to get an answer of -1. Always happens if you multiply the line or the slopes of the line, the parallel and the perpendicular, you always end up with -1 there. So write yourself a note here. The slope of the perpendicular one is opposite of the reciprocal of your line. So number 8, if we have the line -9x minus 6y equals -4, and we want to find the slope of the parallel and perpendicular lines, first thing we have to do is rearrange it and find the slope of the given line. So -6y is going to equal, I'm going to move my 9x to the other side, so it's going to be positive 9x minus 4. I'm then going to go ahead and divide and simplify. So y is going to equal Positive over a negative is a negative, and I can reduce that down to 3 over 2. So y equals 3 over 2x, and I can reduce that one down. I have a negative over a negative, so it's going to be a positive 2/3. So what is the slope of the line that is parallel to that line? The slope of a parallel line will be the exact same thing. So the slope of the given line is negative 3/2. The slope of the parallel line is also going to be negative 3/2. What is the slope of the line that is perpendicular? I want it to be opposite of the reciprocal. So since this is negative, this one will be positive. The reciprocal of 3/2 will be 2/3. On Alex, they say if you take negative 3/2 times a positive 2/3, you should get negative 1. You would. Number 9 then. Consider the line 7x plus 4y equals 3. I want to find the slope of that line. So 4y equals negative 7x plus 3. I'm going to divide by 4. So y equals negative 7/4 x plus 3/4. Now again, they're going to check to see if you're reading when you answer your questions, so watch to see which one they ask for. Here they ask for the perpendicular one first and the parallel one second. I like to do the parallel first. What is the slope of the parallel line? It's the slope of this line, negative 7/4. So what is the slope of the perpendicular one? Opposite the reciprocal, so positive 4/7. So now that we know that, we can now write the equations of the lines that are parallel and perpendicular to the ones that are given. They were nice this time. This one is solved for y. We know the slope of this line is negative 5/2. We want to find the equation that is parallel to this line and the equation that's perpendicular to this line. So now we're going to do what we did on the previous problems. If I know the slope that is parallel, I know the m value has to be negative 5/2 here. For the perpendicular one, I know my slope has to be a positive 2/5 on that one. So now I want to write the equation of the line. So I know y is going to equal negative 5/2 x plus some number b. Here, if I want to write the equation of the line, I know that y is going to equal 2/5 x plus some number b. On both of the equations, they're going to have them going through the same point. So we can put negative 8 in for x, 6 in for y. So I'm just going to do the top one here. 6 is going to equal negative 5/2 times negative 8 plus some number b. So 2 goes into 8 4 times. Negative 5 times negative 4 would be positive 20. And so if I subtract my 20 from my 6, my b value is going to be negative 14. So the equation of the line that is parallel is y equals, my slope was negative 5/2, so negative 5/2 x. My y-intercept was minus 14, so y equals negative 5/2 x minus 14. Going to do the same thing for my perpendicular line. Going to put this in for x and this in for y. So y is 6, that's going to equal 2/5 times negative 8 plus b. Here I can't do any canceling, so 6 equals negative 16/5, right? 2 times negative 8 is negative 16. Plus my b. So to solve that, I'm going to have to take 6 and add 16/5. So again, to do that quickly, I'm just going to take the denominator times my whole number. 5 times 6 would give me 30/5, plus the 16/5 that I'm going to add to it would give me 46/5. So now that I know my value for b, I can write the equation. Y equals, for my perpendicular line, my slope was 2/5. So y equals 2/5 x. My y-intercept, 46/5. So y equals 2/5 x plus 46/5. Number 11, same thing here. They were nice on this one again. They already have our equation for y, solve for y. Sometimes they won't and you have to rearrange it. So, tells me the slope of this line is going to be -3. So for my parallel line, my slope is -3. For my perpendicular line, I'm going to have opposite the reciprocal. So since this is negative, this will be positive. The reciprocal of 3 is going to be 1/3. So here y equals -3x plus b. Here y equals 1/3 x plus b. And we know it passes through the point -5, -3. So -3 in for y, -5 in for x. -3 would equal 15 plus b. Solving that, subtracting our 15, we would get -18 for b. So for our parallel line, y equals -3x minus 18. Perpendicular line, y equals 1/3 x plus b. We are going to put -5 in for x and -3 in for y. So -3 equals 1/3 times -5 would be -5/3. I got to move this to this side, so I'm going to add that. So -3 plus 5/3. So 3 times -3 would give me -9/3 plus my 5/3 would be -4/3 for my b value. My equation then, y equals 1/3 x minus 4/3. So again here, if you're really bad with fractions, you could just put it into your calculator. Otherwise, this is over 1. All I'm doing is finding my common denominator. Since 1 goes into 3 times, I'm taking a little shortcut and saying I can just take that times that number, put it over my denominator, and I have my equivalent fraction. Number 12, on this one, they give you one that is not solved for y, so before you start, you're going to have to rearrange and solve your equation for y. So 7y would equal a -8x minus 1. I'm then going to divide by 7, so y equals -8/7 x minus 1/7. Again, they're going to make sure you're reading and paying attention. Here they ask for the perpendicular and then the parallel. So for my parallel line, my slope is that -8/7. For my perpendicular one, I'm going to have opposite the reciprocal, so positive 7/8. So make sure you're paying attention and you're reading to see which one they're going to ask for, because they like to mix those around on you to see if you're paying attention. So here, y is going to equal 7/8 x plus some number b. And down here, y will equal -8/7 x plus my some number b. This one's going to pass through the point 4, -3. So 4 in for x, -3 in for y. -3 is then going to equal, here I can reduce a little bit. 2 goes into there once, and in, or 2. 4 goes into 4 once and into 8 2 times. So I get 7/2. So I'm going to take -3 and subtract my 7/2 because I have to move the 7/2 over to the other side. Since that's over 1, I'm going to take 2 times -3, which would be -6/2, minus 7/2, which is -13/2. So my equation, y equals 7/8 x minus 13/2. And that's the equation of my perpendicular line. On the next one, we are going to use y equals -8/7 x plus b. I'm going to put 4 in for x and -3 in for y. So -3 is going to equal, can't reduce here, so -8 times 4 is -32/7 plus some number b. So I'm going to have to take -3 and add my 32/7 when I move that to the other side. So 7 times -3 would be -21/7 plus my 32/7. That fraction should always reduce down to my whole number. -21 plus 32 would give me 11/7 for my b value. So y is going to equal -8/7 x plus 11/7. And that would be my equation that is parallel to my given line. (13, 14, and 15). We are going to write the equation given writing the equation and drawing the graph given a real world situation. So we know in real life we don't always have x and y for our variables, that sometimes we have other variables and we like to use variables that make sense. So they're saying owners of a recreation area are filling a small pond with water. They are adding water at a rate of 35 liters per minute. There are 700 liters in the pond to start. Let W represent the amount of water in the pond. T represent the number of minutes that the water has been added. Write an equation relating W to T, then graph your equation using the axes below. So when it tells me to write an equation relating W to T, it means my equation should start W equals, and I'm going to have something with a T in it. If you think about your graph, this is your x-axis, this is your y-axis. Normally we have x and y, and we put something in for x, and we find our answers of y. In this case, we're going to put something in for t, and our answers are going to be the w's. So instead of having x's and y's, we have t's and w's. So I want to find out how much water is in the pond. Well, if I read through this first part again, it tells me there are 700 liters in the pond to start with. So I know I have 700 liters in there for sure. I am going to add water. So I am going to add, and I'm adding my water at a rate of 35 liters per minute. 35 liters every minute. So if I run it for 1 minute, it's 35 liters. If it's 2 minutes, it's 35 times 2, 70 liters, and so forth. So 700 in this pond to start. I'm adding water at a rate of 35 liters every minute. T is representing my number of minutes. That was my time. So I have W equals 700 plus 35T. I now want to graph this equation. So I always like to use 0. I can't run water less than 0 minutes, but I could run the water 0 minutes. If I put 0 in my equation, 700 plus 35 times 0, well, if I don't run the water any extra minutes, I'm not going to add any extra water. I'm just going to get my 700. Then when I pick my other numbers, if I look at my graph, I know I don't want to go any bigger than 10 because my graph only goes up to 10. I want to pick nice, easy numbers to work with. We already talked about 2 a little bit. I'm going to throw a 2 in there. 35 times 2 would be 70. Plus my 700 would be 770. Just to spread my graph out a little bit, maybe I'm going to use the 10. Besides, 10 is easy to do. 35 times 10 is 350. 350 plus 700 would be 1,050. On here, you're not always going to be able to just click and plot the point, the 0, 700 you could, But on these other ones, you have to use that plot point tool. You click on that, and it says plot point anywhere, and you type in the ordered pair. We're just going to estimate where they are. 2 is at 770, so it wouldn't be quite up to 800. 10 is at 1,050, so it would just be barely over 1,000. Connect my dots and make my line. It'll look something sort of like that. All right, number 14 says the Sugar Sweet Company is going to transport its sugar to market. It will cost $3,750 to rent trucks, and it will cost an additional $1,125 for each ton of sugar transported. Let C represent the total cost in dollars and S represent the amount of sugar in tons transported. Write an equation relating C to S, then graph your equation using the axes below. So write your equation relating C to S. Means I'm going to have C equals something with an S in it. What is my cost? Well, my cost, $3,750 to rent my truck, and an additional $125 for each ton of sugar. We are letting S represent the amount of sugar. So an additional 125 S. This is case sensitive, so on Alex you have to use the capital C and the capital S when you put that equation in. I've got my equation. I now want to graph my equation. I'm putting values in for S and finding the answers, the costs. So in my table, the S will go first. My answers are the costs, the C. So again, I always like to put 0 in because 0 is easy to calculate. 125 times 0 is 0. I'm still going to get the $3,750 that they charge me to rent the trucks. I'm then going to use nice easy numbers. Here again, they go from 1 to 10. For example, if I just pick a 2, 125 times 2 would be 250. If I take 3,750 plus my 250, I'm going to get 4,000. And 10's always nice and easy to use, or somewhat easy to use anyway. If I take 125 times 10, I'm just adding a 0, so 1,250. I'm going to add that to my 3,750, and that's going to give me 5,000. So again, if you need to, you can use the plot point tool. Otherwise, you can just use the pencil. On the 0 and 3,750, you'll have to use the plot point tool. We're just going to estimate it. It's going to be halfway between 3,500 and 4,000. The 2 and the 4,000 we can plot pretty easily because that's right on my intersection. 10 and 5,000 should also be nice. I've got my points. I can connect my dots, and if I could draw straight, draw my line. And the last one here. A cookie company uses 1 cup of sugar for every 30 cookies it makes. Let S represent the total number of cups of sugar used, and N represent the number of cookies made. Write an equation relating S to N, then graph your equation using the axes below. So we know we want our equation to say S equals. The tricky part here, the cookie company uses 1 cup of sugar for every 30 cookies it makes. So if we think about it a little bit, if I had 30 cups of sugar, 30 cookies, I would use 1 cup of sugar. If I made 60 cookies, I would use 2 cups. If I would use 90 cookies, I'm going to do 3 cups, and so forth. When it says that I'm using 1 cup of sugar for every 30 cookies, I'm doing 1 out of 30. 1 out of 30 times N. If I rewrite that and simplify it, I'm just going to have the number of cookies divided by 30. So if it's raised 1 out of every, it means I'm going to have a division problem, right? 30 cookies, 30 divided by 30 gives me 1 cup of sugar. 60 cookies, 60 divided by 30 gives me 2 cups of sugar. 90 cookies, 90 divided by 30 gives me 3 cups of sugar. So 1 for every tells me it's going to be division. I've already basically made my table. If I know the number of cookies I'm going to make, how much sugar am I going to use? Well, I found some right there. 30 gave me 1 cup of sugar, 60 was 2, 90 was 3. So 30 with 1, 60 with 2, 90 with 3, and I can connect my dots and draw my line.